Hi, I'm Aronashvili. I'm the CEO of CYE-Security, and I want to take you today through a session to discuss how we change the biased and guessable approach for cybersecurity mitigation and cybersecurity risk management into a more scientific, fact-based approach. Just a quick introduction of myself. I've started my professional career in the Israeli Army as part of an academic excellence program of the IDF. I was assigned to the cybersecurity unit and was one of the founding team of the Israeli Red Team, Section 21. Later, during my service, I was also part of the founding team of the incident response team, the official incident response team of the IDF. And in 2012, after finalizing my duty, I left the Army and founded CYE-Security. CYE brings a very fresh concept of extracting and removing the biased approach of cybersecurity management and the guesswork that we see usually being done in different organizations by adding a scientific concept, math-based approach to actually be able to identify the risk, calculate the risk, and quantify the specific business impact to the organization. The founding team of CYE is based on ex-military cybersecurity experts. We have offices in Israel, the US, Italy, and the UK. During the years since our foundation, we worked with hundreds of customers in different industries and different sizes. And by working with these kind of organizations, you are getting multiple insights with regards to how is right to manage a cybersecurity program, or how do you manage your cybersecurity efforts in your organization. One of the items that I want to take you through today is really how to plan and execute a cybersecurity program that is based on actual risk and real risk identification when compared to something that is more biased or something that is based on guesswork that is usually compliance-driven. So some of you are probably familiar with the concept that we see on the screen. When you have a design, like the security design of the organization, is something that has to be balanced in a way between functionality, usability, and security. What we see here is that sometimes the compliance work or the on-paper planning concept is not always as simple to the user as we expect. And every time that we will allow a shortcut, this shortcut will be taken and will be abused in a way to actually reduce the cybersecurity level of the organization. For that, we see that even with the increase of cybersecurity budgets in different organizations, and that's something that we see quite continuously during the year, we see that the cybersecurity resilience and the maturity level of the organization is actually decreasing. There are multiple reasons for that. One of the reasons is that with more cybersecurity tools, you see more complexity in the network. And more than that, the external, external threat landscape is also increasing and improving from the attacker's perspective. For that, we need a system, a method to be able to first identify the risk, second, to quantify the risk, and third, to be able to mitigate correctly with a formula that can be very clear to all participants, something that is not in a way negotiable, and something that we can all sign off and say, okay, this is fact-based. So when we come to the basics of how to really build a cybersecurity solution to the organization, at the first glance, we encounter quite a lot of challenges and risks that we see that are only evolving and improving and increasing with time. So different threats, different risks, and different vulnerabilities require a very comprehensive, flexible, and sustainable cybersecurity program. And that's something that is not that easy to build. Now, when you look at the solution landscape, you start to cover more and more pieces of this specific threat landscape. So you see different compliance items, you see different solutions, you see different focus areas like IT, IoT, SCADA, environments that are more PCI related and so on. And you start to build your solutions around it. But in there, between the cracks, you can still find vulnerabilities that were not covered by those solutions. And when you start to analyze those, you see that those small items that were not covered will actually be executed and exploited against the organization in the next attack. So actually, now the concept of taking a compliance-driven approach, that's something that was proven to be very nice for compliance, but not very effective for cybersecurity. In order to deal with that, we need to take a different approach. What I want to speak about is what you see on the screen at the moment. On the left side of the screen, you can see that we are actually taking from a very basic concept of risk-based approach, the potential threat sources to the organization. On the right side of the screen, what you see, those are the business-critical assets. The business-critical assets will be the target of the attackers, and those will try to get access and compromise those business-critical assets, using every kind of vulnerability that we are able to identify. That can be a specific application level vulnerability, can be network level, infrastructure level, cloud level, or any other kind of attack. By that, the attacker is able really to draw the way from the left side, which is the, as I said, potential threat source, to the business critical asset. By actually mimicking this specific activity, an organization is able, in a way, to anticipate what an attacker can do in the organization. This is a very important phase, maybe the first phase and one of the most important phases that you have in getting visibility into the organizational cybersecurity level. By doing that, you're able to identify not only what are the vulnerabilities that can be leveraged against the organization, but also how those can be connected together in order to get a specific path or route from the left side, again, a potential threat source to the organization, to the business critical asset. In order to move to the next phase, to take it really to a scientific approach, as I said before, we are now going to evolve from the classic risk-based approach to what we call effect-based approach. In order to do that, we are going to add some data on the information that I've showed you before in the graph. First, we are going to talk about the 3 pillars that we need in order to work with effect-based approach. The first one, and the most important, is really to be able to identify those risk items, to connect them into a specific picture, and based on that, to get a very clear visibility into the organizational risk. Second is to be able to calculate the specific risk. Per item in the graph, we want to know what is the likelihood of this specific item to actually get exploited, and more than that, how those items are connected together in order to take us through an attack route that can actually be very critical to an organization. On top of that, when we come to the mitigation planning, we'll take the results and the specific analysis that we've done in the previous phase and actually integrate it into an optimization algorithm that will take us from a very messy situation, chaotic situation of cybersecurity program to something that is well organized, very clear what needs to be done when, and what is the risk that is associated with the mitigation items and the risk reduction that we are going to experience by this mitigation program. So how we do that? First, per vulnerability that we've identified during the initial process, we are going to assign a specific parameter. This parameter is going to indicate a very specific item. The item meaning what is the likelihood of this specific vulnerability to be identified and exploited by a third party. That means this is somehow a risk factor that is being introduced into the specific graph that we talk about. Now, in order to identify a specific risk to a business critical asset, we can just follow the specific route, step by step, calculate the probability of the entire route to be exploited, and based on that, we are able to get a specific parameter of what is the risk to this specific business critical item. If we calculate also the potential damage to this specific business critical asset, we are able to get into an expected cybersecurity loss, which can bring decision-making to a very easy place. That means you see what is the potential impact. You can see what you need to invest in order to solve this business potential business impact, and based on that, you are able to make decisions that are very easy to make. Now, when we have this specific calculation of potential likelihood for each and every one of the routes, we are able to ask a question, for example, what is the most probable route against my organization? Which is really a predictive way to think about cybersecurity. Instead of trying to identify all the specific places in which you need to deploy your cybersecurity protection, in other words, trying to boil the ocean, we are trying to play the game in a different way. Let's anticipate where the attack is going to come from. Let's block those items first, and that way we create a priority that will be proven to be the most cost-efficient way to actually solve the cybersecurity issues of the organization. By identifying the specific disconnecting edge on this specific route, we are able to identify the way of disconnecting this route in an optimal way, and then calculating the next one and the next one. This approach actually takes a very basic concept of correlating the business risk with the specific threat landscape that we see, and based on that, make decisions on how to mitigate the specific risk in a way that we can, in every step of the way, we can explain specifically why this mitigation item was more important. By doing so, we take the cybersecurity situation that you see in the CISO head usually, and you put it in a very specific order. What is priority 1 to fix? What is priority 2? What is priority 3? Based on that, you are able to calculate or quantify the specific investment that you are going to put in each and every one of the cybersecurity mitigation projects to assign the risk reduction per specific project that you are going to integrate into your mitigation planning, and more than that, to decide on the specific order. One thing that is very common that I want to put it before we end this specific presentation. The next generation solutions that became very famous, right? Everyone is talking about the next generation firewall and the next generation endpoint protection, the next generation and next generation. That's very nice to speak about the next generation. But more than 50% of the vulnerabilities that we found on a regular basis, those are not next generation vulnerabilities. Those are very basic items that can be solved in a very basic way, either configuration change or some kind of hygiene protection that should be integrated in every foundation of a cybersecurity program. So when you think about your cybersecurity program, keep in mind that next generation is very important, but only after you have a very solid foundation for the current generation. To summarize what we are saying in this approach, our approach is to take the cybersecurity biased concept or biased opinion into a scientific concept. For that, we need to be able to achieve the following. First, we need to move from simulators, things that have different assumptions when they start to work. You need to either whitelist or to change a little bit of configuration in order to make them work. That's something that is very important for control validation, but won't provide sufficient protection for your organization. Second, vulnerabilities needs to be now thought as attack routes. So a specific vulnerability that you have in your organization is, of course, the basic building block, but in order to calculate risk, you need to correlate those items and connect the dots together in order to understand how a specific attacker can threat a specific business critical asset. On top of that, in order to calculate or to optimize the cybersecurity mitigation program, you need to be able to translate the technical impact or the technical risk into business impact. That's something that a lot of organizations are failing to do on a continuous basis, and that's something that is very important as part of the cybersecurity work that is being done in the organization. And the last item that I think that is very important, instead of talking about tools or technologies in organization, we need to move and think about capabilities. Capabilities are actually an assembly of a tool, people that activates the tool, and the relevant processes and procedures in order to really get the maximal benefit of this specific capability. Just to summarize, in order to really get into a real protection capability in the organization, effect-based approach needs to be integrated in the organization. That means, first, identifying the risk in the organization. Second, quantifying the risk in a very clear way. And third, optimizing the cybersecurity mitigation planning based on the impact for the organization. Thank you very much for having me, and have a very nice and great sessions that will follow after me. Thank you very much.